Rebecca's recording going?
Oh yeah, we're good.
Perfect. Um, I mean, let's just get right into it, George. I personally want to know how maybe this is just my personality, but is it like emotional like to have been now a part of this, like t taking on the legacy of Jack Schwager with this Ultimate Market Wizard series? Is it is it not like just the coolest thing in the world, or is it just
Yeah,
something cool?
it is. I never intended for this to happen. I never really thought it would happen. I've been reading the books, I guess, since I was probably 21 or 22, so that's a long time now. And I've read them and reread them, and people that I know from grad school and stuff. Like one guy reached out and he's like, "Hey, you gave me one of your Market Wizards books." And I'm like, "Oh yeah," and then I had to buy it again. So I've got sort of the in one of the books, I think it was Unknown, Jack's son talked about how people would walk up at conferences with the dog-eared copies, and I have one of those. So it's very surreal. I guess it wasn't even the intent necessarily, but when it all just sort of happened, it was like, wow, this is real. And it's still surreal now. I mean, honestly, the writing is one thing, and then the sort of marketing and publicity is another. And I'm doing lots of podcasts, and yeah, I guess I've become like low-key finance book celebrity type of guy now, which I never intended or thought would happen. So it's very surreal, but you just keep putting your pants on one leg at a time, I guess, and march forward. And yeah, there were definitely some moments when I was doing it where I'm like, oh, can I do this? But I've read the book so many times and I have written in a lot of different styles over the years. So it was actually kind of natural. Now, I will say, not to go too far from your question, but the first chapter I wrote, I didn't realize how much writing is actually involved in the books. I sort of thought you just took what the people said and put it directly in. I actually, to the extent I ever thought about it, I just figured Jack hit record on a tape recorder and then just transcribed everything. And that's very far from the truth. So my first salvo at a chapter was Jack was kind of like, oh, yeah. And then I got the hang of it gradually. But so now, yeah, it's working great. And Jack's awesome. We actually wrote the whole book without ever meeting in person, but luckily I was supposed to go out there last fall, didn't work out, and then I went there about 2 months ago now. So he and I went hiking in Boulder a couple times and just hung out for a few days, and that was great. It's a bit surreal to meet people that you've kind of seen from afar for years, but I've done that. I've met a couple, or I guess a reasonable amount now of, I guess, quote unquote famous traders or authors. So once you do it enough times, it becomes a little more like still surreal, but it's once it happens enough times, you're not. I didn't ask him for his autograph, thankfully. Maybe I should have though. I don't know. I thought about it like. I thought about taking my copy, getting it signed, and then my wife was like, "What's the matter with you? Don't do that." So, yeah. But yeah, it's cool. It's really awesome. It's just it's bizarre because it is. I've loved the books for pretty much, my whole adult life, and to be authoring, we're going to author another one actually. He says this in the preface.
Okay.
So yeah, so like not one but two of them is just very surreal, and it's cool to be behind the scenes and talk to people and see how the sausage is made. So anyway, I won't go on too much longer with that, but.
No, I mean, this is like, I mean, it's like a market, like staple. I mean, you've got Reminiscence, you've got How to Make Money in Stocks, in my world, and then you've got the Market Wizard series, as like the, three of the best. So it's just awesome. I'm glad it's continuing. Um, was there anyone that stood out? I mean, straight up, you don't have to say, did you have a favorite trader to interview? That was your favorite to meet and talk to?
We did it all over video conference. Jack used to travel and meet people, but given it was two of us and like everybody's all over the world, we just did it via video. So I've met I think only one of them in person now. But I guess going into it, my favorite was probably Christian Kulamagi. Really just because I mean he's such a I hate to use the word celebrity, but he kind of is, right? He's sort of captured the minds and imaginations of so many traders with his live streams and things, and it was just like, wow, cool. We get to talk to this guy, and a lot of the other guys they're awesome. They're great. They have big online personalities too. But I guess just going into it, it was kind of like, wow, we get to talk to this guy. And it was a great interview. But yeah, I guess I'd say a lot of them were fun to talk to. And it's just awesome to be able to ask them questions and then in turn turn that into text that's going to hopefully help other people to get better at trading. So I think I enjoyed pretty much all of the interviews. Yeah, I can't think of any I didn't really enjoy. Although the process is it's long, it's like a 4 hour interview, and then there's multiple follow-ups. So yeah, behind the curtain, like it's not just hit record, transcribe, and you're done. There's a lot of work that goes into it.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. And what I was gonna ask if you can like reveal this, but what was like the process like for selecting the traders that are gonna be in the book, or even finding some traders you'd never heard of that put up outstanding returns?
It wasn't linear. So the original idea, I've published a bunch of papers about traders that I just did mainly because I was trying to improve my own process. My background is more buy-side hedge funds, family offices, macro trading, systematic strategy design. And over the years, I've read a lot of stuff, but when I was designing systems, I started to say, boy, I'm seeing things that Ed Secoda says happening in real time. So I started to write papers about Secoda, and a bunch of other people. And I actually tried to get the papers to people that knew the traders. So I got the Marcus paper to Jack to get his feedback. And he ultimately said, do you want an introduction to my editor because you write well? And I said, no, thanks. And then a year later, I was doing research on the early careers of a lot of like legendary people, Buffett, other guys like that. And you'd be amazed how many brand name people had serious struggles for 1, 3, 5, 10 years before they really hit it big. So I approached Jack and said, we should write a book about this. And at first he said no. And long story short, that sort of morphed into interviewing traders because the editor was like, don't write about people alive and dead, do a traditional wizards book. So we didn't start off saying like, hey, we want to do a traditional wizards book and we're going to find people this way. And because it was this sort of circuitous route to what we're doing now, we really approached it from different angles. Like initially we were trying to talk to people about their early struggle. And then that morphed into, well, let's incorporate some other people so it's not just one sort of central theme. And actually, we talked to a lot of big name hedge fund guys, including some of the guys from the original book, which was just awesome to me. It's like meet your heroes type of thing. But yeah, so ultimately, what we decided is we're going to do the first book, which is independent traders, and the second book is going to be more hedge fund type of guys. And so, because it came about just without real intent, the way we got people is we asked some people that run podcasts, who should we talk to? And then we asked those guys, do you know people that we should talk to? And then we had the Fun Seater guys post something, and people sent their information in. And then Jack had been basically he received emails from some of the guys from years before. Some of the people, one of the guys he knew from giving a speech at a conference for his trading firm long ago. So I guess sorry, it's a very long story, but it wasn't like I think if we had set out and said, "Hey, we want to do a book on independent traders," we would have gone about it way different than we did. But we did it the way we did it just because it evolved into what it is now.
I mean, it's really cool because I mean, like you said that Kwamagi and Lance, especially are really popular and notorious right now in a lot of traders that have come up over the past let's just say call it 6 years since COVID and um, it is, just I think a great way to, continue this, legacy of learning, in, the same methods, I suppose, or this, same criteria through this book, with some of those newer people. And, it's one thing about the trading world now, right, where, in terms of like, mentorship and teaching and, popularity, it's so flooded with quite frankly crap, right? It's the chances of a new market participant finding someone potential mentor that is essentially crap is more likely than not. And there it's just that's what I mean. We try to do. Maybe I'm crap. I don't think I am, but it's trying to get people on the right path and understanding that it's not overnight success. That there's a lot of struggle. There's a lot of work. It's not get rich. And anyways, I don't know if there's a question in there more of just a comment, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that when I was younger, I mean, there really wasn't any information. I'm in my mid 40s now, so when I was like kids now, there's X and there's social media and you can learn about trading, but I grew up in Ohio and nobody here was a trader that I know of. So it wasn't even real until I got to college and was older. And at that point, I mean, at this point, I've done so much research that I know information was out there, but the internet really wasn't what it is now until probably 10 or 15 years ago in terms of just gathering mass amounts of information in one place. So it was out there, but it was very hard to aggregate. So in a sense, the kids or the young people of today, I think, have a huge advantage because there's so much information at their fingertips. The hard part of that is there's so much information that it's like, how do you sift through it to find what is sort of
Exactly.
real and
Yeah.
true? Right. And I guess the Wizard series, I think, as a brand, does a good job of conveying certain realities. But yeah, it's tough. I see stuff and I look at it. I think I've said this. I don't know if I said it to myself in something I wrote or in a podcast, but it was kind of like, man, if I was like 20 trying to figure it out today, it would be tough because you'd be like, is that guy real? Is he lying? I don't know. It looks like he's real online. He's got fancy graphics on his videos, but maybe he doesn't know what he's talking about, And there's that Spider-Man meme that everybody uses where like they're all pointing and one of them's the fake Spider-Man, and it sort of feels like that sometimes. It's like, what's real? I don't really know. So yeah, I think there's good and bad, right? It's like the information is helpful because you can access so much of it, but being able to sift through that and find what's sort of, I guess I'll call it true is tough. And it's made even harder by the fact that there's always exceptions to pretty much every rule in trading. And you can do the wrong thing and do very well for long periods of time, I've found. So that makes it even worse, right? It's like right now, I guess I would say in the stock market, any kind of prudence is not being rewarded. What's being rewarded is essentially saying like, hey, Trump's going to create these V bottoms. I should buy them. I should probably buy them with leverage and just ride the insane wave. But the one time that his approach doesn't work out, who knows? The bottom could fall out, right? But that isn't being rewarded right now. So it's a good modern example of like prudence isn't being rewarded. How do you do it? What's the right thing? And you could do the right thing and not get good results for long periods of time. And you can do the wrong thing and get great results for long periods of time too. So it's a tough, I guess, art. I don't know if I would call it a science per se because there's so much flexibility. But I'll stop there so I don't ramble on too long.
So speaking of that, would you say? I mean, throughout all the Market Wizard books, and this one, are most of the traders adaptable? Are they systematic? Do they adapt with environment in terms of strategy and approach? Yeah, I guess yeah, underlying the question is which one's better, discretionary or systematic? Um,
I've written stuff about this, and I think that for short time periods, which could even be 10 or 20 years, discretionary guys are probably always going to beat systematic guys. But then if you think of like a 40 or 50-year career, there's no one that I'm aware of who consistently puts up giant returns over their entire trading career. Is that because they make enough money and they don't want to take the risk? Did they get older and they don't want to trade like they did when they were younger? Was it the environment? I have sort of a maxim that is the truth is somewhere in the middle, and I think that's the case. So if you told me, you want to get the best results, you should probably be discretionary. But I think if you said, hey, George, you got to do something from when you're 20 to when you're 65, I would potentially choose a system because I think it's never gonna get sick. Its dog won't die, its wife won't leave, and so it can kind of stand up and keep plugging where discretionary traders are impacted by things in real life. Now, the question is, will you let the system run, and will it be the right system for the times as well? So it's not that easy, but yeah, hopefully that's a
Is there a
semi-clear
style?
answer.
Is there a style that you do as a market participant? Like I mean, I don't know if anyone if asked this, but like you're a market guy.
Yeah, yeah. I for managing money, I use systems because I can defend them and explain what they're doing. And what I do there is I try to use robust, which means relatively simple directional systems that incorporate the trading principles, which are respect the price action of the market, ride your winners, cut your losses. But one thing I've found over time is that systems have to adapt. I mean, you can't find any system that doesn't. Maybe Mulvaney, Paul Mulvaney out of the UK, he's supposedly been running the same system for 25 years, but most people adapt. So for myself, I said, well, I want to find a way to build in adapt because one of the problems with systems is if you use math and backtest to create a system and then it goes off the rails, you're going back to math. So it's like you're using the solution to the problem created the problem. It seems like a tautological problem there, right? It doesn't make a lot of sense. So I've and you also hear from a lot of system designers is don't make things too complex. And in my personal experience, that's proven true. So I try to develop simple systems and align them with something that adapts, which in my case is basically themes in stocks. So as a systems guy and a money manager, that's what I do. I also trade discretionarily. I only do that for myself, mainly because I can't always defend what I'm doing or explain it. Some of it's intuition based, and sometimes that doesn't work. But it's all driven by the principles. And there I'm really focused on stocks on the long side because I believe consistency is a key, and we could go back to that in a second. You talked about adapting, but I think there's nothing more consistent than one market and one side. You should, by definition, be there if you're focused on one market, one side, if there's a big uptrend. And so I try to align with that and then design I call it a process as opposed to a system, but
No.
I align my process with what I'm trying to accomplish, which for myself is big returns. And I try to be slower. I'm not a day trader. I don't want to watch the screen all day. I don't find it enjoyable. So yeah, anyway, that's a high level thing. I don't know how deep in the weeds
No,
you want to go with that, but
no, yeah, it's a great. Uh, if how about this? This kind of goes back to the first couple questions. Where we were talking about kind of the market, if you will, being saturated. Um, say you're selling the New Market Wizards book to a group of college students, maybe just in a intro to technical analysis course that like Richard Moglen took at University of Maryland, and they're about to get fall in love with the market and enter their first year of trading. What are some throughout your studies of market wizards and market participants and some of the greatest legends in history? What is something that you'd recommend to someone in their first year starting to fall in love with the market?
I guess I'd say start with my Principles of Great Traders book. And yes, that's a plug for my book, but you can find it for free online. I'm actually going to offer it as a Kindle. So if you like it, buy the Kindle too. It'll be, $9 or something. But really what I did with that was I aggregated the quotes of, I think 20 or 25 different traders over about 125 years. And I showed that they all say the same things. And behind the scenes, I basically identified what I thought were some of the greatest market legends. So Druckenmiller, Soros, Sakota, back to Commodities Corp, Livermore, guys like that, right? And I said, okay, put the traders up here on this axis, and then put all the different variables that they talk about over here. And so you've got diversification, et cetera, et cetera. And what I found is I wanted to see like what boxes are checked for everyone. And there were only three, and it was respect the price action of the market, ride your winners, cut your losses. And so I thought, well, those are the only really consistent principles. You can use those short term, long term, what have you. But I think learning those and seeing so many great market people saying the same thing. Like people have told me the book I wrote is that one's kind of boring, but it's intentionally boring. It's like these guys are saying the same thing over and over and over across people and across time. So I think if you instill yourself with those principles, that would be a good place to start. From there, I think that designing a trend system is probably a good way to begin because trend systems inherently have the principles, their trend systems are riding price trends, right? They stick with winners and they cut losses. So they inherently, unless you make them too complicated, will adhere to those principles. And I believe that if I was starting out, I'd want to design one of those. And it could be as simple as just, if the price is above the 200 day, be long or otherwise be out or be short, essentially. But that'll teach you, I think, about consistency, and it'll show you the principles in action in real time. And if you trade it, I think that that's necessary because it's very easy to simulate something and say, well, I could have gone through that because the 50% drawdown is no big deal if I get 40% return or 20 or whatever the number is, right? But in real time, it's a lot harder because you're like, well, what if this is when the system breaks? And that's where everything comes in. So I think if you're reading about that stuff, you're running a system, and at the same time, you're reading books about it and listening to as many podcasts, you're really going to come to know systems and you're going to come to know the principles from a systematic mindset. And then if you pay enough attention, I think you'll start to see that this guy says one thing and this guy says the exact opposite, and they're basically both successful. So which is right? And when you come to really get the mechanics, you'll say, "Oh, I like this approach better. I know that like I'm gonna if you vol target, for example, in trend systems, it's like you reduce position sizing as something goes up, so you don't let your drawdowns be as big, but you won't catch as big of winners. It's a trade-off, like without the time machine, you don't know what's perfect. But anyway, if you did that, I think over time, for me personally, that really taught me the ins and outs and the nuances. And whether I enter on the open or the close, if I'm running over a long enough time horizon, it doesn't matter. Whether I use a 20-day exponential moving average or a 50-day simple, it doesn't matter. If I use a 50-day high versus a 30-day moving average, like you'll find that over enough time, it doesn't really matter. You get similar results as long as the durations of these variables that you're using are similar, right? And once you see that and you start to answer questions and you see, well, this legend said this, but I want to do it this way.
Mhm.
And I don't have to do it his way because I understand why he does that, but I don't agree. And you can explain that. That's when I think you've graduated to being a trader, in my mind, at least. And that's where you can further evolve and say, well, I understand the systems very well now, but I want to be discretionary because this is my goal and I can't really achieve that with a system. Or you might say, hey, I want to do a system and I want to use the math. Or you might be like what I said earlier about myself, where I know I have to adapt, so why not make it inherently part of the process as opposed to having to do it on the fly in response to a drawdown? And there's really no right answer, but very long answer here. Hopefully it's valuable. But essentially, it shows that's how I would, if somebody said, hey, George, set up a trading university, which I think I could probably do. And I think it should be taught. Now, the sidebar, like it annoys me that people teach stock picking, but they don't teach this because I think there's enough evidence to teach trading. But I would probably do that because I think that's going to be the best bet for people that really dig in to see the principles which are inherent to the great traders, watch them in motion, see how you respond emotionally to what happens, really come to understand what happens if you tinker with this part or that part, what it does to the average results. And then once you really understand the functional mechanics, you can say, okay, I'm going to use the principles, but I don't need to have a system. And you'll probably also, I'll wrap it up with this, but you'll also start to see that systems are ultimately this line I use a lot. They're mechanical implementations of discretionary logic. So people think systems are sort of, I mean, they are mechanical, but it's only the execution. When you go to the logic and the design, it's like, well, how do you design a system? Well, it better make money. I'm not going to pick the one that loses money. Well, right there, you've optimized. Where's over optimization? Nobody knows. How do you qualify the back test? Is it the Sharpe ratio, the MAR ratio, the compound annual growth rate? There's no one answer. Is it absolute or relative? And all these decisions, if you got 100 different systems guys, they'd have 100 different answers. And so ultimately, the logic is discretionary, the implementation is mechanical. But I think when you come to see it like that, you're like, well, this is ultimately discretionary too. So should I be
Mhm.
discretionary? Some guys say no, some say yes, but yeah, that's a lot of information
No,
in a
that's a great
5%
answer. That was
window.
a great answer. I want to bring it back to the some of the traders in the book real quick.
Sure.
Were you at all kind of like, very surprised kind of hearing about some of the returns these guys put up? Just retail traders, brokerage account, most of them. I mean, even Lucas with how I know how young he is at the time of, his success and stuff.
Uh, in one sense, sure. It's always sort of jaw-dropping. In another sense, this will be the sixth Market Wizard book, so it's possible. So I think what I was mainly surprised by is I call it the scripture or the literature, all the stuff I've been talking about that I've researched for 100 years of traders and Wyckoff's books and James R. Keen and forward, right? Most of them say don't day trade. They say don't trade small cap stocks because there's a lot of shenanigans there. And when in doubt, you should probably be long instead of short because you've got a tremendous tailwind essentially with being long. You're betting on progress, society, whatever, right? I won't go down that rabbit hole. But these guys were really thriving and succeeding, a lot of them, at least in their early days, by shorting smaller cap stocks for day trades, which was kind of surprising. And it actually forced me to challenge some of the assumptions of what I thought was possible and wasn't, and to also, I guess, open my mind more, which is great. It's like I've now come to believe anytime I say, well, you can't make money doing that, there's probably somebody out there doing it. So yeah, I guess that would be the most shocking thing that I found in interviewing the guys for this book, sorry.
So I know you recently released the first chapter, with Komagi, and people have been, discussing. I mean, the dedicated, market obsessed people. Um, how much do the other traders go into some of their struggles, before? I know people end up seeing the end result, right? But how deep do they go? I mean, are we going full into, the early days, the middle 2 to 3 years of, tumultuous hours and challenges?
Yeah, yeah, we do. So the original idea, once it became a Wizards book, is I wanted to call it Market Wizards Origins, and we were going to focus on the early careers of the very well-known people, because success tends
Yeah.
to absolve struggle, is what I've found, right? But I think for guys that haven't gotten where they want to be, or just for all of us, we love the story of think of the greatest movies of all time. It's
Mhm.
franchises, right? Star Wars, Luke Skywalker's a nobody and then he's a somebody, or Rey, or Avatar, the cripple in this world becomes the king of the avatars, or Harry Potter's the poor kid who becomes the great wizard. And Breaking Bad did it, but the other direction. So that was sort of the premise that we started with. And when we started talking to independent traders who were less known, we still had that initial focus. We had to go more with the story because it doesn't quite work if you stop at the end of the origin story unless somebody's very well known. But
Mhm.
we definitely dug in and talked about, the emotional experiences and how hard it was, and asked very pointed questions like, how did you get up and keep going, despite losing? And Kulamagi, the chapter is out there for people that pre-order. You can download it from the publisher, but at one point, we said, yeah, you didn't, I forget exactly the words that are in the book at this point, but the essence is essentially, you had blown up and blown up. Like, why didn't you go back and finish college? What gave you the belief that you could do this? And he said something like, well, it was taking me longer and longer to blow up. So I figured I was improving.
Yep, he did. Yeah, that was a
Yeah.
good part. Yeah.
Lucas was another one. He had a couple rough runs there in the early days, and he said, "Well, I could always see a light at the end of the tunnel." And so, pretty much, let me think. Yeah, I mean, there's a couple examples of guys who just don't really lose money, but several of them had blow ups or very difficult drawdown periods relative to what they were used to, essentially.
That's really cool because I mean some of these guys that maybe there's not a lot of information out there on or whatever, they kind of you hear the returns and they just kind of come off as like these invincible like traders that won't experience any big drawdowns. And that's why I made my post about Christians and why that section of his chapter was stood out to me, because I mean yeah, I just I've been a boom and buster in the past myself with my trading and stuff, and so that studying all those guys who've gone through stuff like that, but still made it out in the end is awesome to hear. But yeah, I don't know. When I was younger, I played sports and stuff, and I was pretty competitive with it, and my always most logical thought was just who did it the best. Let me study those guys, and they must have known something. They must have done something right. So, when I first, found Reminiscence of a Stock Operator and then also Market Wizards, I mean, the first book, I didn't even know that was a book until like 2 years into when I got involved in the markets. And that was like finding the holy grail. And then I actually found I mean, some of your write-ups before the Market Wizards book was even announced on, Soros and Druckenmiller. And I've read those and taken my own notes and stuff. But yeah, I just wanted to say you do great work and I appreciate those write-ups a lot.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think it's helpful to study the greats, but I guess the thing I would add is you really need to to do it, right? Like at one point, none of us knew how to ride a bike. We could read a manual. We probably couldn't when we were five, but in theory, you could, but you got to get on and ride the bike. And that also relates to, I think the Wizards books are great for many reasons, but one of them is you can sort of sample different styles and say, well, this sounds good to me. And then you can try it and see if it is a fit. And if not, try something else. But really, in the end, I think everyone has to find their own sort of tweaks or take on any given trading style. You have to morph it to be your own because otherwise you just won't be able to stick with it through the hard times, which are pretty much inevitable with every strategy that I've ever seen. Nothing works all the time. Although two of the guys in this book do make money, like trading is like a W-2 job to them almost. It's wild, but they're glued to their screens nonstop, so they have to be.
This kind of goes back to the process and discretionary stuff. Um, and I guess is more opinionated based and connected with your three principles as well. Um, are those all three equal principles, or is it more important to have a strategy that gets you out of bad markets where where your process won't be effective, or is it more important to be involved in in markets where your strategy will be effective to where you end up staying maybe too long in bad markets. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, which of those?
Yeah, I guess we could unpack it a little bit and split it into maybe two parts, if I understood you right. One, which of the principles is most important? I quote Ed Sakota a lot to the point that I sound like I'm like a parrot sitting on his shoulder. But I do that mainly because most of what he says winds up proving true in my experience, and I want to give him credit for the things that he says. And oh man, I just lost my train of thought. What was it? Rats. Okay, what was the first part of the question again?
Which is more important is being involved
Oh,
in
oh, right.
market.
Okay, perfect. So he has this line, and somebody says, like, what's the best part of a system? And he says, that's like asking, like, what's more important to keeping life function in a body? Is it your heart or your lungs or your liver? I think that the principles all essentially have to work together. I guess if I had to say people should focus on one to the exclusion of the others, which I just don't think would work, but if you had to, it would be cut your losses, because if you can cut your losses, in theory, you can stay in the game and survive as long as you're not too leveraged. I think it was Tom Basso from New Market Wizards who did a study, and I think other people have done it. But if you randomize entries and cut your losses, you can still be net
Mhm.
profitable. So the other part of your question, if I understood it right, is how do you adapt essentially? And I think that there are guys like Lucas is a good example. And market wizards are outliers, but even within the outliers, there are outliers. I mean, by virtue of statistics, any group is going to have an average, and then there's going to be outliers, even within the outlier group. So Lucas has been able to really morph trading styles in a way that's just sometimes hard to believe. He started off doing one thing and basically shorting parabolic shorts in smaller cap stocks, and then he morphed to trading essentially longer but faster swing trading. That may not be the right term for it, but essentially it's close to swing trading. And I guess I don't want to say graduated, but he's evolved into longer term, more thematic, sort of Soros Druckenmiller is what he calls it, type
Mhm.
of trading or investing. But he is the exception. I mean, even within the Wizards, he's the exception. What I would say is the thing with the Wizards and people that are successful at markets is there are rules. The principles are rules in my mind, but you can find exceptions to using the principles. Chris Camillo in Unknown Market Wizards is a good example. He doesn't cut his losses. He does buy option premium, so in a way he's limiting his losses, but you can always find exceptions. So I break it down into probable, impossible. And I think that we should all go with what's more probable because then we have the wind at our back. So you should use essentially the principles. And so back to adapting, I think that there are people that can adapt very well, but most people don't do it very well. They wind up like when they're supposed to be over here, they're over here, and then they're over here. And that goes back to what I was saying about one market, one side. You're going to be there when the good times come. You're not going to
Mhm.
be off short in bonds when the stock market goes on an amazing run if you focus on stocks. So My personal thought and opinion on it is that maybe you're the one in a very few who can adapt very well, but most people they pick one or two styles, probably one. Like I'm a swing trader, or I'm a longer term position trader, I'm a short term trader, and then they have a few setups within that framework, and that's really what they focus on. And in terms of adapting within that framework. I mean, it's subtle. These are shades of gray, right? We want black and white answers, but it doesn't work like that. But I think what they'll do is one of the things that you see consistently throughout the books and the different traders is when things aren't going well, they'll sometimes rein in the size and trade smaller until they get the mojo back, essentially. So I think that what I've seen more, if you're going to try to adapt, adapt how much risk you're taking and how aggressive you're trading based on the environment. And when the times are very good for what you're doing, make hay while the sun is shining. And when they're not as good, rein it in and have the sort of presence of mind to just say, hey, if there are no setups for what I'm doing, I'm not going to do anything because this isn't my environment. Because generally speaking, let's say you trade 52-week high breakouts and you go through a period like 2022 where there aren't any for 7 months. If you go try to be a mean reverter in that environment or a dip buyer, it might work, but you might wind up over there messing with that, and then your original style comes back and you don't capitalize on it because you've distracted yourself. So I think most people should stick to kind of one lane, have a few setups, and accept that there are going to be windows where things don't work, where you're just not going to have trades if you're discretionarily trading this sort of setup method.
That's big. There's a good lesson there because I've definitely switched around and been distracted, and my style is back in play, and I wasn't ready for it. This might be kind of a deep question, and not really have like a specific answer, but after interviewing all those guys and talking to them and putting the book together, what separates them? What makes them outliers besides, obviously just the returns that they've put up?
I think they have personality traits, and there's a list of. It's been expanding lately, but I have it in a chapter. Simon Russo is a pseudonym, but at the end of his chapter, I share the personality traits that I think are inherent to the wizards. And I don't have these memorized, so I'll read them from my list here. But one is they're very self-aware. Two, and this is sort of the more psychological, emotional mentality side of things,
Of
but they're
course,
very
yeah.
self-aware. They're very clear on what they're trying to do, typically. They believe in themselves, even though they often have zero evidence to support that they should, right? Blowing up and
That's awesome. Yeah.
yeah. They're very independent for the most part. I mean, a lot of them in this book in particular, like I didn't want a boss, I didn't want to be in a bureaucracy. So they're independent people typically. They're very passionate about trading. They're very, very committed, and they're willing to keep pursuing the dream despite failure and fear of subsequent failure. The two others that I've sort of added just from doing these podcasts are they're very persistent and they can focus. They can focus in on what they have to achieve the goals. So all that sort of works together. But I guess, and again, like everything in trading, I'm sure you could find people that are doing amazing that don't check all those boxes. But in my experience, most of the great traders that I've either met or studied have most of those attributes in terms of their personality. Now they can be totally different people. One guy would be great to go have a beer with on Friday, and another guy would not, right? But they have that sort of those personality traits are common in terms of just I think what motivates them to become successful.
Who's the one you want to get a beer with?
Oh, I think multiple, a lot of the guys in this book they're just good guys, again, like they're all over the world, right? So it's tough because like one guy in Croatia is like, come over and get a beer. I'm like, yeah, sure. I'll be there tomorrow. But yeah, most of these guys, I can't think of any of them that didn't have sort of good personalities. So yeah, I wouldn't put one above another, I guess, in that regard.
Anybody that you're able to or want to name drop that almost made the cut but didn't for the book?
No, I'd prefer not to.
Sure.
No offense, just I think that I don't see much upside in doing that. We talked to a lot of people. There were a lot of very qualified and talented people, but the truth of writing a book is it's a little like, do you guys cook at all? Or you take out food guys?
I cook, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So like you can't just do salt, 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 right? You got to do salt, pepper, and then maybe some oregano or whatever. And writing a book is similar in a sense in that if you just put too much of the same thing
Mhm.
in a book, it just doesn't work. And there's also the story side of it that plays a role. You know, if somebody's story is not compelling or exciting to read potentially, it just doesn't work as well as somebody else's story who is more compelling. So it isn't necessarily like certain people that we talked to maybe didn't make it into the final cut, but oh, and there's also the length of the book. You know, you can't have 1,000-page book. I don't think anybody would appreciate that. That's actually why we're doing two books because we didn't want to do a 600 or 700 page book. But yeah, so I guess like to the extent I don't want to name anybody for that, but it's not necessarily because of what they did or didn't do. It's just there are different forces at play that dictate how the final book gets published. You have other stuff too. Some people you'll interview, you think it's great, they drop out. They're just like, hey, I don't want the publicity. And so then that opens a spot. And then you sort of have to put the recipe together and be like, oh, well, we're out of pepper. What can we use instead of pepper? And yeah, I guess that's probably the best analogy I have for
Yeah,
most
yeah.
people. Yeah.
Question from the group. It says you worked for Victor Niederhofer as an unpaid intern. What were some of the lessons you learned early in your career, and what was the biggest takeaway from working for him?
You know, Victor, I sort of learned short-term systematic trading, and I guess it was just sort of an exercise into how that approach worked, statistics and markets, and it was great. I was a fish in water. I really liked Victor. I liked working for him, but I guess I learned how short-term systematic trading works in terms of studying different patterns in markets, looking for viable T statistics. I don't want to go too far into the weeds, but yeah, I also learned he listened to musicals. He loves musicals, and he had a CD player because this is before, there were iPods, but it wasn't quite what it is now. Bluetooth wasn't a thing, so I was in charge of the CD player, and I had to put on musicals. So I can probably sing almost any musical ever because when you sit in a trading room for hours and hours and hours, and he didn't like a lot of noise except for the music. So these things just find their way into your brain and never leave. But yeah, I guess I'd say in terms of trading, I learned that. Yeah, and watching him take risk was very interesting too. I mean, he was an aggressive risk taker. Um, but yeah, I don't know if it was one thing so much as just sort of attitudes and seeing how people do it. And it was a good experience, though.
Do you have a specific book that's like an all-time favorite for markets and trading?
You know, I think it's probably, I read a lot of them, but I read the Livermore books over and over and over. And whether it's his biographies or the books he's written or reminiscences, which is, a fictionalized account. But I guess I listen if I don't have anything else to listen to, I listen to reminiscences over and over and over. And it's ironic because when I first got into the business, people were like, you have to read this. And I started reading, I'm like, this is terrible. Like, just tell me, what do I do and when do I buy, when do I sell? But the more I've learned, the more I've come to love that book because it's stories and all the lessons are there, but they're not, it's not like a manual. His How to Trade in Stocks is his, right? Because How to Make Money in
Yes.
Stocks is
How
I
to
always
trade in
get
stocks.
I need to set them on my desk so I stop forgetting because O'Neill was a big Livermore guy, right? And so he had How to Make Money in Stocks, and Livermore had how to trade in stocks. It's probably not a coincidence that they're that similar, but that's almost like a manual. But I've really just come to like reminiscences a lot more, and I read. I listen to it or I read it. I have like four different copies. Oddly, I've found discrepancies between my different copies and things that I see online, which is a bit bizarre. But maybe that's what happens when things go out of copyright. People copy paste and leave sections out, and you don't get the original. So, but yeah, I would say, I think if you're young and you're learning, if you're like I was, that book's just going to annoy you. Although chapter 10 sort of has a lot of really good information. I said that on X recently. I was like, somebody said, "Oh, there's nothing in there." And I'm like, "Read chapter 10, read it over and over, and you'll come to get it." And then a lot of the old legends, Sakota said it publicly, Druckenmiller said it. Pay attention to Old Turkey, those two in particular. Every Thanksgiving, I send out via Substack the Old Turkey section, and I have the quotes from Sakota and Druckenmiller saying like you'll probably have half the game licked, I think is what Druckenmiller said about that section. So I think all the wisdom's there, and the more you come to know this stuff and get to let's call it the 900 level classes, the more I think you'll appreciate that book. But just to be totally clear, and I said it already, but when I started, I was like, this is annoying. Just tell me what to do. So it may be annoying when you're starting out.
Those my it's my experience too for the first time reading that. But again, after a third and a fourth, well, listen, I do audiobooks for most things. I'm usually on the go. And will there be an audio version for this? I think you guys have
Yep. Yeah, the
yeah.
guy is recording it now. And he's pretty good with accents, so it should be exciting.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, we thought about trying to use like AI. Somebody said you should get the traders to read their own sections, and some of them were willing, but I think recording audio, I don't know how much you guys do, but it's a real nightmare. It's like people will misspeak, and then how would we do it? Like I got to read question one, and then the other guy reads question two, or we'd layer them in. And the platforms really won't let you use AI yet. So we got a guy who's pretty good with accents, and it should be good, I believe.
Is there any book out there? Like, do you have any a dream? Is there any books out there or content out there that you want to write that you feel like maybe the list of the top five don't cover, and you think you could combine and release the ultimate George Coyle?
Yeah, the collective works. I joked with the publisher about that. I was like, nobody's lining up to read the collective works of George Coyle, and he laughed and said, maybe they will someday.
They will
Um,
someday.
yeah, there's a couple things that I'm working on right now. One, I'm trying to convince Jack that we should write a screenplay about Livermore, although it's a sad ending. So, but I think that would be pretty cool.
That would be
That's
awesome.
Yeah, it's not a book. I think I'm going to convince him to do it. We'll see. But yeah, I probably need to fly out there, see him again, and just we'll go hiking. When I met him, I think I said it earlier, but we hiked in Boulder. So maybe if we hike him out and I'll convince him to do it. But that's one. Another one I think is I love O'Neill's book, How to Make Money in Stocks. But I feel like it's if you think about academics, you think of like general and applied, right? It's a very applied book. And so what do I mean?
Mhm.
What's CanSlim? It's a mechanism to screen down a universe to find stocks that you want to trade, but is it the right one? Not necessarily. It is a method. There are a ton of different methods. Trend followers use methods to find futures to trade in their systems, and other people use other methods. And then you've got O'Neill's cup with broken handle setup. Is that the right setup? It's a setup. Kulamagi has his setups. Lance has his. Everybody, not everybody, but most guys that are trading that style have their own setup. So I'd like to write something based on all the knowledge that I have that really approaches it from a more general sense and breaks down the steps, takes it out of applied, makes it general, and says, let's talk about ways to filter a universe. CanSlim's one. Here's another. Here's another. Here's another. Which is right? There is no right answer without the time machine. You got to pick what's right for you. Do you do fundamentals? Do you not? And then, okay, well, what about setups? Well, here's the setups from Darvis used boxes, right? And Livermore used his pivot point, and O'Neill used his cup with handle. And there's as many setups as there are traders, but really kind of get into the fact that there is no right setup. It's more about the right setup for you. And back to a Sakota quote, he says, what's the best system? Somebody asked him, and he said, well, what's the best car? What's the best wife? Like, it depends on you. But I think I'd like to do that and then walk through the sort of generalized variables that can pivot to different things. So, the selection process would be CanSlim or
Mhm.
I want stocks with this liquidity or this market cap. But really kind of, I think if people could see it in that way, then they could break down and study different methods that fit more. And they could, if you want to be faster trading, read this stuff or listen to these podcasts. And if you want to be slower, these are the people to look at. But I believe that there's a structural framework to discretionary trading based on all the research and interviews I've done. So that would be a cool book to write. And then one other thing that I'm kind of working on right now is, I love the Wizard series. I love the Q&A format, but one of the things that I've found is there are stories out there that are great stories, but they don't qualify to be market wizards. But there are people that have built massive businesses in the investment space and they are wealthier than some of the wizards ever will be. Not like that's necessarily a qualifier, but they don't have the returns. So I've thought about doing some interviews and trying to talk to people more about less, what moving average do you use to affect your great results is how do you go out and build a business? Because I don't think anybody's really done that. And, talk about the fundraising side, talk about building a team and an infrastructure. So it would be a similar but slightly different take on the idea. But those are sort of, I guess, the Livermore screenplay, generalized discretionary trading, and then interview type format, but focused on maybe more business building than investment process, I think could be interesting.
I think I speak for everyone when I say I'm incredibly excited to do. I actually have 10 copies pre-ordered on Amazon.
Oh, thank
Um,
you.
yeah, and I plan to give them away to members, my audience and stuff over sometime in June.
Oh,
So
well,
I
thank
look
you.
I look forward to doing that. Um, any final words, man? I don't want to keep it too long. I'm very grateful for you taking the time to come on. Incredibly excited. Jealous that you got to sit down with these guys. Like that's the dream, man.
Oh,
Also,
me
it's the
too.
dream to be on the other side, right? Hope maybe you can interview me one day. We'll see. I'll keep working until then.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think Jack and I, people ask us, can anybody be a market wizard? And he's, we're similar in mind, but we depart a little bit. He thinks that like a classic violinist who's going to perform at I'm not too into violin, so wherever they would perform, Carnegie Hall, right? If that's where it is. Apologize to potential violinists who are like, no, it's not there. But he thinks that people are inherently born with certain traits that make them market wizards or
Mm.
capable of becoming market wizards. And I agree with that, but I also wonder if other people could achieve it, without being born via willpower, if they could potentially get there. And I've sort of put together a little list of questions, and I guess I'll start with a comment. I think you can learn almost everything you need to learn to be a market wizard from reading the books. And somebody asked me like, well, how have your returns been? And I've done okay. I produce reasonable MAR ratios, but I haven't achieved wizard worthy results. And it really got me thinking about why. And I started by really saying, well, okay, well, what qualifies a market wizard? How do you break them down? What attributes do they have? Some people get great results because they're basically early movers. Typically when you're an early mover in a space, you do well. Look at Facebook, right? I mean, they've done very well. Could somebody go recreate that now? Could Apple be created in a garage? Soros didn't have much competition, nor did Buffett. But I went through all these variables and personally found out for me, I think it comes down to being really clear on my goals, designing a process that's capable of achieving my goals. And the hardest one is consistency for me, sticking with it through the thick and the thin. And that's just me. And I may write all this down at some point, but I sort of put together a little list of questions that I think people could potentially ask themselves if they're of the mind of becoming a market wizard. And I think most people would like to be. I'd like to be too, right? But here, I'll read them off for you. So, one is, can you be clear in your goals? Can you define clear goals? Two is, can you develop a process that marries your goals with your temperament? If you try to be what you aren't, it's going to be a disaster. But can you find a way to get there? Can you keep looking until you find a strategy that essentially enables you to do what you want to do? So, for example, you don't have to be a day trader or a swing trader to get big results. I mean, somebody bought SanDisk and just made 30, 40 times their money in a year, right? And that's an outlier, of course, but it's possible. So can you design a process that marries your goals and your temperament? Can you overcome your potential personality traits that are detrimental to your goals via sheer willpower? That's a tough one. Can you defy your inherent nature in the name of your goals? But you think about it, and like there are people that, I mean, nobody's really born ripped, to use like a fitness analogy. They say, I'm going to have to eat this and not this and this, and I'm not going to go out and have the beers, the wings, and they can get in very good shape, low body fat, whatever. So in theory, humans are capable of achieving their goals via willpower, even if it's not natural. And then I guess the last two are, can you really truly believe in yourself and your abilities? And then can you persist despite repeated failures? And I think people should probably sit down in my mind and really answer those questions. And unfortunately, those questions force you to look at yourself in a way that you may not want to look at yourself. But that's another thing I've found, personality traits. A lot of the great traders, they're very aware of who they are. And, I don't know that they always like every element of that, but they tend to be very clear on who they are, what they can do, what they can't do, and they find solutions despite potential shortcomings, maybe. So, anyway, I think those questions are important for people to consider and think about and answer if they really want to become market wizards.
And what was the third one again? I wrote all those down, but I didn't catch the end of it.
Uh, can you be clear in your goals? Is that the one? No, wait, sorry. Let's see here. Okay. Can you overcome potential personality traits that are detrimental to your goals via sheer willpower?
Yes, that was it. It's a
Yeah.
great one.
What a
I don't
great
know,
one.
maybe we can't. I guess I'd ask you guys, do you think you can change your inherent nature to achieve a goal? People have done it, right?
So, if you're blatantly ask me, I'm a recovering alcoholic of 7 years now. Basically, right around when I started beginning trading, there was I was being pushed and pulled in multiple areas of life, waiting to make a choice on kind of what path I wanted to go down, and it's had I believe a profound impact on my trading. I've done a video a few years back about the 12 steps of trading and how being very involved in the program. For example, I do speeches and sponsor people and participate at Hazelden here in Minnesota. But that has had I believe, a profound impact on my trading, to where some of my core personality traits I learned, before I really started being obsessed with the market and trading, very actively. I had to learn how strategies to overcome some of those personality traits, and I know it's profoundly helped me in the markets, because at some times they are very related, to where we've talked with Christian Flanders about this a number of times, but you can replace some of those words with trading, or with losses, or with wins in the market, and the lessons are very, very true. Um, so I mean, I think I've experienced it, and there'll be times and days where I have to re-experience it again, or relearn, or adapt it, or recall it at the right time too. Which is sometimes the hardest part, is recalling those lessons when maybe they need to be spoken to yourself internally. Um, so anyways, that's my opinion. That's my answer on it, or my experience on it.
Well, thanks for sharing it. Rocco, what do you think?
I think I want to sit down and really think about those questions that you brought up tonight a little bit more because those are really great. I really like those a lot.
Yeah, I guess I'll say this. There's a guy named Viktor Frankl. He wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. It's sort of a philosophy. He was in a concentration camp, and it's it's basically about sort of, I guess different people would have different opinions, but it's about finding meaning despite life being very difficult.
Mm,
And there's a line, and I believe it was, if a man has a why, he can suffer almost anyhow. And
mm,
these guys, when it was their birthday, they would get soup from the bottom of the bowl, which had a few peas in it. And every time I get soup, I somehow think of that line. But I think human beings are very capable of suffering through significant things in the name of their goals if the why is there essentially. So in theory, people could subject themselves to what it takes to achieve those types of results. Now, that ultimately, not to get too philosophical, but leads to the next question, should you? I think that if you pursue trading to the exclusion of everything else in life, um, that may not be the best way to go. And a lot of the guys in this book, now that they've achieved their success, are starting to think, okay, I've made my money. I don't want to do this forever. They want to do different things. They want to be, philanthropically inclined, or they want to do other things. So I do think balance is a good idea, something good to keep in mind. So yeah, anyway, I guess that may sound slightly contradictory, but just stuff to ponder and think about. And I think those questions are important. And if you find like, hey, that sounds terrible, I don't want to do that, then hey, it's good, do something else, right? It's a big
Yeah.
world, lots of ways to go.
Yeah, very thought-provoking talk. This was great.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on, guys, and we'll do it again sometime.
We'll hold you to it.
All right. See ya.
Thank you, George. Nice to meet you.
You too. Bye.
Cool.
There you go.
That was a great talk. He is
Yeah,
he's
very very
incredibly
well
smart.
spoken. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
What a great person to take over the series. That's what I was thinking about the whole time is what a great choice. And how cool is that Jack Schwager is able to um transition the massive series into the hands of someone like him for the future.
Yeah, if you go to Twitter and you can go to his account, it's just GFC4, his Twitter account. He has like a link tree in his bio that has like all of his writing that he's done that's completely free, by the way. You don't have to pay for any of it. And he has gone so in depth on some of these traders from the past and stuff. It's really good stuff.
Yeah. Um
And so the QQQ is red.
QQQ red. What time is it? 2 p.m. Okay, yeah, perfectly. It was perfectly an hour. Um I'm excited. I'm excited to listen to that book. We'll have to think of something to give away. Those copies to people.
Yeah, you said you
Uh,
got 9 to give away?
I had 9 to give. I'm probably gonna keep two.
Okay.
I'm gonna keep two, and then one of them at the end of it. I'm gonna write my own chapter and put it in there and then sell it.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm gonna give myself a pseudonym. I'm gonna call me. Yeah, okay, never mind. Uh,
Gushers, man.
oh boy. Um, hey, on seven market with a trade. Yeah, that was good. I have to go back. I'm gonna go